back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, a place where I interview tech leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, futurists, technologists, thought leaders, and even the occasional celebrity about how they are leveraging technology to transform their business. In the tech world, we're hearing two different stories at the moment. One, there is a global tech skill shortage, and on the other side, an economic uncertainty is engulfing the planet, and even big tech companies are making huge layoffs. For example, as I record today's episode, Microsoft is axing 10,000 jobs, and other big tech firms are following the same route. But today, I want to learn more about how all this is impacting design hiring. And all this was inspired by seeing the recent design hiring report by Figma. And anybody working in design will know that Figma is a design platform for teams who build products together. It was born on the web and it helps create, share, test and ship better designs from start to finish. Figma has a reputation for making the design process faster, more efficient and fun, while essentially keeping everyone on the same page. But today, I want to learn more about the world of design, the role of technology, and the industries impacted by design that you might not automatically associate with that too. And also we'll explore some insights from that design hiring report. So today I've invited Andrew Hogan from Figma to join me on the podcast to explore this in much more detail. As the world opens back up, I find myself going to more and more tech conferences around the world, and my son is currently working in Southeast Asia right now. We got talking about how we watch TV has completely changed, and it often feels like there's so much TV and yet nothing to watch, and that is very often caused by archaic regional settings that determine what you can and what you cannot see. So I'm currently checking out White Lotus, Severance, and I cannot get enough of The Last of Us, which is probably because of that delayed gratification thing. But I'd love to hear more about what TV shows you recommend, how you watch them, and how you access the most content possible. And after looking for a reliable VPN, I decided on Private Internet Access, which is the world's most transparent VPN provider. They have 30 million downloads, and PIA has servers in 84 countries in all 50 states. But as someone that binges my way through countless box sets, the fact that Private Internet Access works on all major streaming services so that you can access more content than ever, wherever you're located in the world, that was a big win for me. And there are also apps available for all operating systems, and one subscription can protect up to 10 devices at once. And if that's something that you're in the market for, please head to piavpn.com/techtalksdaily and get an 83% discount. Yes, that's 83%, which works out at just $2.03 a month. Plus, you get 4 extra months completely free. But to activate it, you must go to piavpn.com/techtalksdaily. One last time, piavpn.com/techtalksdaily, and let me know what TV shows you recommend by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where Andrew's waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name's Andrew Hogan. I head up the insights function at Figma, which means that I scan the market, I run special research projects to understand particular topics, and then I write and talk about those things inside of Figma and outside of Figma.
And I'd love to find out more about how you got your role at Figma or the story behind it. So can I ask that you share your origin story, where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that would ultimately put you on this path you're on today?
I think if you go back far enough, it actually starts with strategy games, and it starts with playing strategy games, tabletop games, sports, and being drawn to games where you could succeed together. And games with complex systems that you had to work together to sort of understand or could learn from other people. And once you start getting into tech and into computing, you understand other people have so much to teach me about these topics, about how to succeed at these things. And you could succeed, you could understand how people around the world were approaching it, people from Japan, people from the UK, what strategies they used, the early days of esports, all those things, how games could change with mods. And all of this kind of brought me to this point where, wow, tech could make a lot of things better. It could make more than games better. It could teach us so much. and we could solve bigger, better problems together. And I actually think this link to gaming and how you collaborate and design in a multiplayer way within Figma is actually one of the reasons I'm so drawn to Figma and why it resonates so much, because people just solve problems more effectively when they work together, and tech often enables that and helps that to happen.
And of course, that path would lead you to Figma. And we've mentioned it several times now. It's famous for being a collaborative web application for interface design. But I'm conscious there will be some people listening that are hearing about you for the first time. So just to set the scene, get everyone on the same page, can you tell me more about the company and the kind of problems you solve with technology?
So Figma makes collaborative tools where teams design together, where they can work together in a multiplayer fashion, and design, and talk about designs in Figma and in FigJam. And one of the really interesting things about it is that unlike just sort of like a blinking cursor, you can actually gesture with with your cursor. You can sort of point at things and other people can see that. So in a way, it's like you have a presence, and it can help you to communicate and collaborate differently in this sort of more distributed world, where we're either working with people, talking to people from all around the world, and Figma makes tools that make that work better.
And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was to talk a little bit more about Figma's recent design hiring report, which I recently found online. So again, to set the scene, can you tell me a little bit more about the background behind that report, who you surveyed, etc.?
So we talked to design hiring managers about their hiring practices. And we did that because we had just heard so many teams struggling to fill out. They had open recs. They, had been looking for designers for months. They were, posting on forums and on Twitter and LinkedIn, does anybody have any designers? I'm looking for leads. I'm still recruiting. And we just heard this sort of like pain, and we thought that we might be able to help. So the core of that was a 300 plus design hiring manager survey of companies that were 1,000 plus employees across the US, the UK, France, and Germany. But we think the findings are applicable to companies of many sizes. And we looked at the differences between companies that said they were successful and then companies that maybe they were a little less successful and a little less excited about their efforts.
And of course, we hear on a regular basis topics such as the Great Resignation or the big tech skills shortage, but not everybody gets to hear about what's happening in the design hiring landscape. So for people outside of that industry, can you tell me a little bit more about the current state and what challenges are occurring around them? Right
now, it's actually, so if you think about it from the last decade, the iPhone sort of forward, it's just hiring has been on a tear. So the UK Design Council puts out a sort of the economic value of design report. And they just stated that it almost matches the economic contributions of the hospitality and real estate sectors combined. And then design actually grew at twice the rate of the UK economy between 2010 and 2019. So you have this real big increase in design. But within that, there's this massive increase in digital design. So, startup software businesses that are trying to get off the ground, the digital transformation of more mature companies and industries. I mean, from zero banking apps to it's essentially table stakes to have a great app to bank with. Over the last 10 years, that's been a pretty dramatic shift. And you can think about that across retail, utilities, all kinds of manufacturing, all kinds of industries. And that really came to a head over the last 2 to 3 years, where, we have data that one retailer went from 75 to 250 designers. A financial services company went from 250 to 500, a manufacturer from 50 to 250. You have this massive increase in just the last 3 years, as these companies realized how fast they needed to digitally transform and change the way that they interacted with customers and meet customer expectations. So you sort of can see why there's a bit of a shortage, and hiring is hard when you hear those massive increases. And I didn't even mention the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world, the Microsofts of the world. I'm just talking about, your sort of more standard industries.
And I'm glad you mentioned the standard industries there, because I was reading that it's no longer just tech or the tech industry that's hiring designers, but it's now every industry. So I'm curious, do you have any stats that you can share around that, just to bring that to life?
Yeah, absolutely. So the UK Design Council's report found that 3/4 of all designers in the UK work outside design, and half of all digital designers work outside design. So that's, not like at an architecture firm or at some sort of agency or something like that. That's in-house at one of those more traditional industries. And in the US, it's 2/3 of digital designers. It's been a pretty dramatic shift from, well, maybe we should do this thing in 10 years, in 5 years. Maybe we should kind of, make ourselves a little bit more digitally forward to, we have to do this immediately or we're going to be out of business.
And although there are 5,000 miles between us today, I do suspect that we're seeing the same trends on both sides of the Atlantic, and also there'll be people listening all over the world. Both experience a turbulent time, a lot of economic uncertainty, etc. So I'm curious, how is this economic uncertainty and news of big layoffs, how is that impacting the world of design hiring? Are there any trends you're seeing there?
It's certainly slowed. Since we started the research, since we conducted it last year, it certainly slowed. But keeping an eye on these things, what's been interesting is how leaders at these more traditional companies that are working to digitally transform, who are not necessarily thought of as tech companies, are saying now is the moment. Now is when I need to be hiring. Now is when I can find the talent. And so you see like the GDS, UK's government digital service, hiring designers right now, Lloyd's, Sky, Harrods, Barclays. Chase in the US has been very public about their plans to continue hiring. So what you have is kind of a slowing, but not a stop. And that's because these are long-term plans that companies are investing in.
And obviously, you live and breathe this space. You've probably seen it, much of these trends before. But was there anything in this report that surprised you?
I loved this question from you, Neil, because it's true. I do live and breathe this. I think the thing that came out to me the strongest was how much the hiring managers wanted to commiserate, how much they wanted to talk to other people who were dealing with the same issues, how much they wanted to sort of hear how other people were approaching this. It was almost like they felt like they weren't doing a good job, like they were missing something. It shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't take up this much of their time. I mean, on average, they were spending 1/3 of their time. I talked to people who were spending half or more of their time just trying to fill open roles. And so I think the depth of the sort of, I don't know what I'd call it, frustration feels wrong, but the depth of the feelings really surprised me. And, we found some things that I think will help people, around sending signals of design culture, around making sure it's clear that personal development and personal growth is a opportunity at the company, and just sort of talking about your perspective more publicly. I think some hiring managers kind of had this sense that those things might help, but they really found it helpful that someone had addressed this problem that they felt maybe a little more alone about.
And of course, we've all doom scrolled our way down news feeds of headlines that were created as almost clickbait because bad news sells, good news doesn't. So in a hope of restoring the balance in the universe, what makes you hopeful or maybe even excited about the future of design hiring? And are there any other insights that you might be able to leave us with today to leave on a positive note?
I mean, at one point, a decade ago, potentially 2 decades ago, design was thought of as a little bit of an afterthought, or maybe like an artsy kind of thing. Some companies had certainly embraced it. Some companies had embraced design thinking, but I think the depth of the investment now should make us hopeful. the belief that design can help, the belief that design can solve problems or, improve issues or bring to light opportunities to make, the world better. I think that should make us hopeful that, the companies are seeing that this is possible, and then they're investing to try to make the world and, their products and services work better. So, the fact that there's this much competition, the fact that it made sense to do this research and write this report, that's pretty amazing.
And the world has changed so much in the last 2 to 3 years. And I think now more than ever, there is a real pressure on everyone to be in a state of almost continuous learning. So I'm curious, in your role, where or how do you self-educate? Because it's so important right now, isn't it?
It absolutely is. We're doing some other research now about how executives view themselves in the world and what they're doing. And one of the biggest topics that's been coming up is how much they see the need to adapt and change and learn. And, like many of them, I turn to LinkedIn, Twitter, and find people that, are inspiring or have an interesting perspective or just bring forward interesting information. And then I use that to kind of dig deeper into other topics. And then one other secret weapon that I use is Reddit and the user experience subreddit. And then there's a handful of others just to kind of change the information sources a little bit. And then, of course, there's a steady diet of podcasts. But I just find that, that curation that comes from other people is really helpful.
100% with you. Some great recommendations there. And we have covered a lot in a short amount of time today. So for everyone listening, where's the best place for listeners to find out more information about that report that we've referenced today, contact your team online, or just find out about anything that we discussed?
So you can find the report on the Figma community from Figma's page if you search for design hiring in 2022. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from people and post pretty frequently there. So would love to talk to anybody who has perspectives on this. And I always learn from the response to artifacts like this.
Well, I love chatting with you today about this design hiring report and also how elevating a culture to attract the right talent. It's so important right now. But I think more than anything, it was your personal story that brought all this to life and some of the challenges you've encountered along the way. But just a big thank you for taking the time to come on and share that with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Neil. Great to talk.
So do you work in design? Did anything we talked about resonate with you? Did we miss anything? Are there any myths in the industry you'd like to finally lay to rest, or anything you would like to add to today's conversation? Whatever it is, I invite you to email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilC.Hughes. Let's keep this conversation going and let me know your thoughts. I know that every podcast you listen to will have a message from your host telling you to please leave a rating and review. But in a world where we're all ruled by algorithms, it really does help the show reach more listeners. So please, if you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a review. But I'll be back again tomorrow. I've got another guest lined up already, but a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.